Hi and welcome to Animation Deconstructed. My name is Shaul, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the After Effects user interface. When you first open After Effects, you're going to be greeted by this splash screen. So I'm just going to close this down and we will be left with a blank project. Before we begin, we need to ask the question, what is After Effects? And the easiest way to describe After Effects is it's basically the Photoshop for video editing. Where Premiere Pro is more your layout program, After Effects is where you will create the magic. So whether you're into video editing, motion graphics, character animations, and even game animations, After Effects is where you can create that magic. Returning back to the user interface, I want to point out this top right area and this little drop down here. These are your workspaces and you're able to select one so that it manipulates the way the application actually looks. I have mine selected on a small screen, and that's just because I'm on a laptop. This is very similar to standard and default. So I'm just going to go back to small screen, but you'll be able to follow along if you're on either of these as well. The next panel I want to take a look at is the project panel. And this is exactly where you will bring in your footage, sounds, images, image sequences, Photoshop files, and even Illustrator files. Anything you're going to be working with in your animation, this is where it's going to go. So let's just bring in some video quickly. The quickest and easiest way to do this is to double click in the project panel, but if you want another way to do it, the file drop down, import file would help you. Just going to double click and I'm going to choose this drone shot 1080p. At the top of the project panel we can see there is some footage here. If we want to work with this footage, we need to create a composition, which brings me to my next question. What exactly is a composition? A composition is basically a container of layered graphics, footage, and sound. Think of it like a canvas for video. The easiest way to create a composition is just to drag this down onto this button here, which is our Create Composition button. So I'm going to do that, just drag this down, and the entire user interface will come to life. We will be diving deep on compositions, files, and their settings in another video called After Effects Essentials, Compositions, and Footage. In the middle, where this footage is appearing right now, this is called your composition panel. And this is where we can see exactly what's going on in our animation and how everything looks with our layers and our styles and everything else, how it will look like when we render this out for video. On top of that is our toolbar, and these tools over here, the pointer tool, the hand, and the zoom are used to manipulate anything in the composition panel. We can move this footage around by clicking and moving it with the selection tool. We can also scale it and hold shift to constrain. I'm just going to Control Z to undo. This hand tool is used to move around, but before we do that, let's just talk about the zoom tool so that we can show the hand tool in a better way. The zoom tool is easier used by just rolling your scroll wheel forward and backwards. Whilst we zoomed in, the hand tool can be activated just by holding down your space bar or pressing down on the mouse wheel and moving around. You can see how this will help if you're working in a certain area and adding some particles or text or something. So let's just zoom out over there. The other way to zoom in and out of your footage is this drop down right here. I like to keep this on fit to 100% when I'm not needing to zoom in and out of things, which brings me to my next tip. You can actually change the size of all these compositions by hovering over these little gaps and clicking and dragging. Now they've fit up to 100%, helps really well because I can always see my entire composition. The next drop down that I want to point out is this resolution drop down, and I've got mine set to auto, and that's what I'll usually use as I'm working through, so I can see how the footage will look on a video that somebody's watching. But as your animations become more complex, you'll be wanting to drop this down because of resources, and it just takes a really long time to preview animations when you've got a lot going on. If this doesn't make sense right away, it will as we go through more tutorials and more work, and you're working on more videos and effects. Moving along at the bottom here, let me just click on it. This is your timeline panel, this entire piece over here. And we can see our drone footage is right over there with this long bar over here. The timeline panel is exactly where you will layer your footage, graphics, and sounds to create your animation. I just want to create some text so that we have two layers. So there's two ways to do this. We can go to Layer, New, Text, or we can right click in the timeline, go New and Text. And I'm just going to type in enlightened, and I'm going to select my selection tool. Now I just want to change the scale of our text, or the point size of our text, and I can do this on the right over here in the character panel. If you can't see it, just click on the window button and go down to character and select that. I'm just going to take this down, and then I'm going to move this up. And if we look at our timeline panel, we now have two layers. Each of our layers has this little arrow here, and we can twirl these down, and we can see each one has some attributes that we can change. I'm going to twirl down on the transform, and you can see that we can change the position, the scale, the rotation, the opacity, and we can add more to this. And we will dive into layers and masks in another video called After Effects, Essentials, Layers and Masks. So I'm not going to dive too much into the rest of these right now. This is just to explain the user interface and what we're looking at. But to make this a bit more interesting, I'm just going to scale this over time. So a brief introduction to animation and how it works. This little stopwatch over here, we can click this on to say, okay, we're going to set it at 100, and at another point in time, we're going to change that scale. Which brings me to this over here is your playback head. And you can click on this and drag it forward and backwards in time, and you can see we can move through our video. This thick bar over here is our work area. This is how much time we want to work inside, and let's just say we only wanted a 5-second video from this long 22-second video. We can click on the end and bring this into 5 seconds. Now, not only will this mean that this is where our loop will be, it'll also mean that when we render this video out, this is exactly the time frame that's going to be rendered out. This other bar on top is just what enables us to zoom in and move around our timeline. This down here is also a zoom tool, but it doesn't allow us to move like this one does in and out of the timeline. So back to just adding some scale to this. I'm going to move my playhead to the 5-second mark, and I'm going to change this to 110%. Now you'll see over here in the timeline we have these two keyframes, and this text will then scale over time. To play through this, we can just press down on our spacebar once as a click, and once this area goes green, it will be playing in real time. This is your caching area, and if it's not green yet, you will see either your video playing really slowly or really fast, depending on the complexity. That won't be real time until that green area is filled and playing back. You can see this is just looping over 5 seconds like I explained before. The other place to find this, the play button and the rewind button and everything else, is under preview. You can just click over there and we have our play button over there and our stop button. If you can't find your preview, just go to window and down to preview and select that, and it'll open it on the right. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe, and till next time.